Imagine a world where the richest nations owe more money than they could ever repay in 1,000 lifetimes. The United States alone carries a national debt of $35 trillion, enough to stack dollar bills to the moon and back twice. Yet the global economy hums along, markets rise, and governments spend. How can the most powerful countries on Earth be so deeply in the red without collapsing? The answer lies not in Washington or Beijing, but in a quiet empire of debt that began centuries ago and now stretches across every continent, binding nations in invisible chains. Our story starts in the fog-shrouded canals of 17th century Amsterdam. Dutch merchants had perfected a revolutionary idea. Instead of locking gold in vaults, they issued paper promises backed by the full faith of their trading companies. The Bank of Amsterdam, founded in 1609, became the first modern central bank, accepting deposits and issuing notes that circulated as money. Merchants no longer hauled chests of coins across stormy seas. They carried lightweight paper that represented real wealth stored safely behind brick walls. This simple innovation birthed the concept of public debt as an asset. Investors bought bonds from the Dutch East India Company, earning steady interest while the company conquered spice routes with borrowed capital. Debt was no longer a burden, it was fuel for empire. Fast forward to 1694, when war-torn England faced a desperate choice. King William III needed funds to fight France, but taxes alone couldn't raise enough. A group of private financiers proposed a radical bargain: lend the crown £1.2 million at 8% interest, and in return receive a charter to create the Bank of England. The deal was struck in a smoky London tavern. Overnight, the British government gained a perpetual borrowing machine. The bank issued notes backed by government promises to repay, and citizens snapped them up. For the first time, a nation's debt became a tradable commodity on the open market. By 1720, British consols, perpetual bonds with no maturity date, were the safest investment in Europe. Investors from Genoa to Edinburgh poured savings into paper promises, funding navies that would soon rule the waves. This model spread like wildfire. France created the Banque Générale in 1716 under John Law, who convinced the Regency that paper money could erase royal debts. The Mississippi bubble inflated and burst, but the lesson endured. Controlled debt could finance grandeur. Across the Atlantic, Alexander Hamilton watched Europe's experiments and saw opportunity. In 1790, he persuaded the fledgling United States to assume state debts from the Revolutionary War, consolidating them into federal bonds. Northern merchants who held the paper cheered. Southern planters who owed the money grumbled. Yet Hamilton's stroke of genius bound 13 quarrelsome states into one credit-worthy nation. The U.S. could now borrow at rates rivaling Britain, launching canals, railroads, and factories on borrowed time. The 19th century turned debt into a global web. Rothschild banks in London, Paris, and Frankfurt coordinated bond issues for governments from Brazil to the Ottoman Empire. When Mexico defaulted in 1827, European gunboats enforced repayment. The message was clear: sovereign debt was sacred, backed by the threat of force. By 1914, Britain alone owed foreign investors the equivalent of 2 years' national income. Yet the City of London remained the world's financial heartbeat. The system worked because everyone believed tomorrow's growth would outpace today's obligations. Then came the shock of World War I. Governments spent fortunes on trenches and shells, issuing bonds at breakneck speed. Britain borrowed $10 billion from the United States, more than its entire pre-war debt. When the guns fell silent, reparations and war debts formed a daisy chain of obligations. Germany owed the Allies owed America, and America demanded gold. The chain snapped in 1931 when Austria's Creditanstalt Bank collapsed, triggering defaults across Europe. The Great Depression taught a brutal truth: when trust evaporates, debt becomes poison. World War II rewrote the rules again. The United States emerged as the only major economy intact, holding 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. At Bretton Woods in 1944, 44 nations agreed to peg their currencies to the dollar, and the dollar to gold at $35 an ounce. The IMF and World Bank were born to recycle American surpluses into global reconstruction. Europe and Japan borrowed dollars to rebuild factories. America lent freely, secure in its gold hoard. Debt flowed outward, cementing U.S. hegemony. But cracks appeared by the 1960s. Vietnam War spending and Great Society programs drained U.S. gold reserves. France under Charles de Gaulle demanded bullion for dollars, shipping battleships across the Atlantic to collect. On August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon slammed the gold window shut. The dollar became pure fiat, backed only by faith in America's economy. Overnight, every currency became a promise without collateral. Central banks could print money to buy government bonds, keeping interest rates low and deficits rolling. The age of unanchored debt arrived. This shift unleashed a hidden empire. Commercial banks, no longer constrained by gold, created money through lending. A depositor's $100 became a $90 loan, which became another deposit and another loan, multiplying through the fractional reserve system. By the 1980s, Wall Street packaged mortgages into securities, selling slices of American home debt to pension funds in Norway and sovereign wealth in Singapore. The 2008 crisis revealed the empire's fragility when subprime borrowers defaulted, freezing $8 trillion in money markets. Central banks responded with quantitative easing, buying bonds with freshly printed money. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet ballooned from $900 billion in 2007 to $9 trillion by 2022. Today, global debt stands at $305 trillion, 350% of world GDP. Japan owes 266% of its annual output, yet borrows at negative yields because investors crave safety. China's local governments hide $9 trillion in off-balance sheet debt through shadowy financing vehicles. Developing nations pay $1.2 trillion annually in debt service, more than they receive in aid and investment combined. The IMF acts as global debt collector, imposing austerity when countries falter. In 2023, 25 nations spent more on interest than on education or health. Who holds the strings? The empire's nerve center is the bond market, $120 trillion of promises traded daily. Central banks own 30% outright. The rest belongs to pension funds, insurers, and foreign governments. China holds $3.2 trillion in U.S. treasuries, Japan $1.1 trillion. A single tweet from a Fed chair can swing interest rates worldwide. When the U.S. borrows to fund deficits, it exports inflation to poorer nations whose currencies weaken. The dollar's exorbitant privilege lets America consume beyond its means while others tighten belts. The mechanism is elegant and merciless. Governments issue bonds, central banks buy them with printed money, asset prices rise, wealth concentrates. From 1980 to 2020, the richest 1% captured 38% of global wealth growth, while the bottom half saw just 3%. Student debt in America tops $1.7 trillion, chaining a generation to interest that barely cover interest. Corporate debt fuels stock buybacks, enriching executives while factories close. Even wars are financed on credit. U.S. spending in Iraq and Afghanistan exceeded $2 trillion, added quietly to the national tab. Yet the empire depends on one fragile belief, that growth will forever outrun interest. Demographics tell a darker story. Aging populations in Japan and Europe shrink workforces while pension obligations swell. Climate change demands trillions in infrastructure just as debt service peaks. If interest rates rise 1%, global payments jump $3 trillion annually. A single default by a major player could cascade, freezing credit like 2008 on steroids. History whispers warnings. Every great debt supercycle ends in restructuring, through inflation, default, or war. Rome debased its denarius until citizens bartered goods. Weimar Germany printed marks to pay reparations, birthing hyperinflation. The question is not whether the cycle turns, but how. The hidden empire of debt is not a conspiracy. It is a machine built on human ingenuity and hubris. It lifted nations from poverty and financed miracles of engineering.
It also widened chasms between haves and have-nots, turning citizens into collateral. The ledger never lies. Every borrowed dollar must eventually return home with interest. As night falls over trading floors from Tokyo to New York, servers hum with quadrillions in derivatives tied to government promises. Somewhere, a child is born who will inherit this balance sheet. The empire endures not because it is just, but because no one has found a way to live without it. For now, the chains remain invisible, forged link by link in the quiet language of compound interest.
The machine never sleeps. Beneath the surface of daily headlines, a parallel economy operates in the repo markets, where banks borrow overnight against treasury collateral. In 2019, rates spiked to 10% in a single morning, forcing the Fed to inject $300 billion in days. The plumbing of debt had clogged. Similar tremors ripple through Europe's Target 2 system, where Germany is owed 1.2 trillion euros by southern neighbors, unsettled claims that could fracture the euro in a crisis. Emerging markets tell a starker tale. Argentina has defaulted 9 times since independence, each cycle beginning with foreign loans for railways or dams, ending in currency collapse. Sri Lanka's 2022 bankruptcy followed Chinese infrastructure loans that consumed 80% of government revenue in interest. The Belt and Road Initiative has lent $1 trillion across 150 countries, securing ports and mines as collateral. When Zambia defaulted in 2020, Chinese creditors seized its copper mines. Debt has become a geopolitical weapon, more effective than tanks. Technology accelerates the empire's reach. Blockchain promises decentralized finance, yet 60% of stablecoin reserves are US treasuries. Crypto billionaires borrow against Bitcoin to avoid taxes, mirroring medieval nobles pledging land for loans. Algorithmic trading now executes 70% of bond market volume, amplifying volatility. A single mispriced auction can cascade into billions in losses before humans notice. The ultimate paradox: central banks fight inflation by raising rates, which increases debt burdens, forcing more borrowing to pay interest. In 2023, US interest payments hit $1 trillion annually, more than defense spending. By 2030, the IMF projects 40% of government revenue in advanced economies will service debt if rates stay elevated. The empire devours its host. Reform whispers grow louder. Modern monetary theory argues governments with sovereign currencies can never default, only inflate. Critics counter that unchecked printing erodes trust, citing Venezuela's 1,000,000% inflation. Debt jubilees, ancient practices of forgiveness, resurface in academic papers, though creditors shudder. The BIS warns of zombie firms kept alive by cheap loans, draining productivity. Beneath the numbers lie human stories. In Ghana, IMF loans come with conditions to cut teacher salaries, sparking protests. In Detroit, municipal bankruptcy in 2013 slashed pensions for retirees who spent decades believing promises. A farmer in Iowa plants corn financed by operating loans at 8%, praying commodity prices rise before harvest. The empire touches every life, often without announcement. The endgame approaches not with catastrophe, but erosion. Trust, phrased thread by thread. When Japan's debt hits 300% of GDP, will investors still buy? When America's Social Security Trust Fund depletes in 2034, will markets fund the shortfall? The empire's architects, Hamilton, Rothschild, Keynes, never imagined a world of negative yields and trillion-dollar balance sheets. Their creation has outgrown human scale. Yet history also shows renewal. After 1945, war debts were mutualized through Marshall Plan grants. After 1980's Latin American defaults, Brady bonds converted loans into tradable securities, restoring access.
Creativity has always matched crisis. The question is political will. Stand on any street corner and watch delivery trucks, smartphones, hospital equipment, all purchased on credit. The empire is not a shadowy cabal. It is the air we breathe. To dismantle it risks suffocation. To ignore it invites collapse. The tightrope stretches into fog, and every generation must walk it anew. The hidden empire of debt is the greatest story never told in full, because its ending is still being written, one interest payment at a time.